The warm, golden light of the afternoon sun bathed the hills of Galilee, casting long shadows over the olive trees that dotted the landscape. Jesus and his disciples had gathered on one of their favorite hillsides, a place where they often sought rest and solitude after long days of travel and teaching. The setting should have been peaceful, but today something felt different, heavier. As Jesus looked around at his disciples, he could feel the tension that hung in the air. These men who had followed him so faithfully seemed troubled. They sat in uneasy silence, their usual conversations and laughter replaced by awkward glances and furrowed brows. It wasn't hard for Jesus to understand what was happening. The growing unease among his disciples had been building for some time, but it had now come to a head. Peter, the most outspoken and passionate of the group, finally broke the silence. His voice, usually filled with confidence and zeal, was now hesitant and filled with worry. "Master," he began, lowering his eyes, "we have been arguing among ourselves. We argue about who will be the greatest in your kingdom, who is the closest to you. We compare ourselves to each other, and it has caused tension between us. We feel divided." The other disciples, though quiet, nodded in agreement. Andrew, Peter's brother, added softly, "It is hard to understand each other sometimes. Our pride gets in the way and we say things that hurt." Jesus, with his infinite wisdom and deep compassion, understood that this was not just a surface-level issue. It was something deeper, something all too common in the hearts of men. Pride, jealousy, and the desire for recognition had begun to create cracks in the unity of his followers. These were not bad men. They were simply human, struggling with the same flaws and insecurities that had plagued humanity since the beginning. With a gentle smile, Jesus motioned for his disciples to come closer. He did not scold them, nor did he express disappointment. Instead, he invited them to sit down on the soft grass with him, under the shade of a large olive tree. "Let me tell you a story," Jesus said, his voice calm and reassuring. The disciples, though still burdened by their inner struggles, were drawn in by his tone. They knew that when their master spoke, there was always something to be learned, something to be understood that would bring them closer to the truth. Once, in a small village nestled between rolling hills, there lived two brothers named Jonah and Elias. As children, Jonah and Elias were inseparable. They were the only children of a hard-working farmer, and they spent their days running through the fields, climbing trees, and imagining great adventures together. Their bond was strong, forged in the carefree days of childhood, filled with laughter and love. Their father, a wise and gentle man, taught them many lessons about life and the importance of family. He often reminded them that their bond as brothers was more valuable than anything else they could have. "The farm will come and go," he would say, "but the love you have for one another is eternal. Always remember that." For many years the brothers lived in harmony. They worked together on the family farm, helping their father tend to the crops and care for the animals. Jonah, being the older of the two, often took on more responsibility, and Elias, though younger, admired his brother's strength and wisdom. They were a perfect team, and the farm prospered under their combined efforts. But as they grew older, things began to change. Their father passed away, leaving the farm to both of them equally. At first, the brothers continued to work together as they always had, but slowly their differences began to cause tension. Jonah, now the head of the family, was careful and methodical in his approach to farming. He believed in sticking to the traditional ways their father had taught them, trusting that the old methods would continue to provide for them. Elias, on the other hand, was full of new ideas. He had spent time learning about modern farming techniques and believed that if they took more risks and expanded the farm, they could achieve even greater success. But every time he suggested a new idea, Jonah dismissed it. "We've done things this way for years," Jonah would say. "Why change what works? Our father's methods kept this farm running for decades." Elias felt frustrated and unheard. He admired his brother, but he couldn't understand why Jonah was so resistant to change. As the months passed, the tension between them grew. Small disagreements turned into heated arguments, and the bond they once shared began to unravel. The brothers who had once been so close, now barely spoke to each other. One evening, after a long and difficult day on the farm, Elias finally reached his breaking point. He approached Jonah, his face flushed with anger. "Why do you always have to be in charge?" Elias demanded. "Why do you never listen to me? I have ideas too, but you act like I'm still a child, like I don't know anything." Jonah, taken aback by his brother's outburst, responded defensively. "I'm not ignoring you, Elias," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "But I've been doing this longer. I know what works, and I don't want to risk everything we have for some untested ideas. You need to trust me." But Elias couldn't accept that answer. He felt as though his brother didn't respect him, didn't value his thoughts or opinions. "Trust you?" Elias spat. "How can I trust you when you don't trust me? You've been making all the decisions without even considering what I have to say. This farm belongs to both of us, Jonah, not just you." The argument escalated, with both brothers raising their voices, each more concerned with proving themselves right than with understanding the other. Finally, in a fit of frustration, Elias stormed off, leaving Jonah standing alone in the fading light of the evening. The days that followed were filled with silence. The brothers who had once worked side by side, now avoided each other. They divided the farm between them, each tending to their own half, refusing to ask for help or advice from the other. The villagers who had always admired the bond between Jonah and Elias noticed the change. They whispered among themselves, saddened by the rift that had formed between the two brothers. Their mother, now an elderly woman, watched the growing distance between her sons with a heavy heart. She had always taught them the importance of family, the value of working together, but now she feared that the bond they had once shared was broken beyond repair. One day, a great storm loomed on the horizon. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, and the wind began to howl through the trees. The storm was coming fast, and it threatened to destroy the crops that the brothers had worked so hard to cultivate. Jonah and Elias both knew that if they didn't work together to protect the farm, they would lose everything. But their pride held them back. Jonah, standing on his side of the farm, looked over at Elias, who was frantically trying to cover his crops before the storm hit. He knew that Elias couldn't do it alone, that he needed help. But Jonah's heart was still bruised from their argument. "Why should I help him?" he thought bitterly. "He doesn't even appreciate what I've done for this farm." Meanwhile, Elias was struggling against the wind and rain, his mind racing with frustration. "Jonah thinks he knows everything," Elias fumed. "He doesn't care about my ideas, my hard work. Let him take care of his side. I'll manage on my own." As the first drops of rain began to fall, both brothers worked tirelessly, but the storm was too strong. The wind whipped through the fields, tearing at the crops, and the rain came down in sheets, soaking the earth and threatening to flood the fields. Despite their efforts, it became clear that neither Jonah nor Elias could save the farm alone. Just as Elias was about to give up, his strength fading in the face of the relentless storm, he heard a voice behind him. "Elias!" Jonah shouted, running toward him through the rain. "We need to do this together." For a moment, Elias hesitated, his pride warring with the sense of relief that washed over him at the sight of his brother. But then, without a word, he nodded. Together, the brothers worked side by side, just as they had in the past, securing the crops and protecting the farm from the worst of the storm. By the time the storm passed, the brothers were exhausted, but the farm was safe. The crops had been saved, and the fields, though battered, would recover. As the rain began to subside and the clouds parted, revealing the first rays of sunlight, Jonah and Elias stood together, drenched but victorious. Elias, still catching his breath, looked at his older brother and spoke softly. "I'm sorry, Jonah. I've been so focused on proving myself that I forgot what really matters. I was wrong." Jonah, his voice thick with emotion, replied, "I'm sorry too, Elias. I should have listened to you. I let my pride get in the way. We're stronger together than apart." In that moment, the rift between them healed. They embraced, their bond restored, and the love that had always existed between them shone brighter than ever before. The storm had passed, both literally and figuratively, and the brothers had come through it together, stronger than ever. Jesus paused, his voice gentle and full of meaning. The disciples sat in silence, the weight of the story settling over them like a warm blanket. Each of them could see themselves in Jonah and Elias, their own struggles with pride, jealousy, and the desire to prove themselves. They too had let these feelings drive a wedge between them, but now, hearing Jesus' story, they understood the deeper truth. "You see," Jesus continued, "relationships are like the bond between Jonah and Elias. There will be times when pride and anger threaten to pull you apart, when the storms of life seem too great to weather. But in those moments, you must remember that your love for one another is more important than any disagreement. When you let go of pride and choose humility, when you reach out in love and understanding, you will find the strength to face any storm." Jesus' eyes moved from one disciple to the next, his gaze filled with love and compassion. "The greatest among you is not the one who is always right or the one who seeks to be the greatest. The greatest among you is the one who serves, the one who listens, the one who loves without condition. Like Jonah and Elias, you are stronger together than apart. Navigate your relationships with compassion, and you will find peace." Peter, who had been sitting quietly, felt tears welling up in his eyes. He thought of the arguments he had been part of, the times he had let his pride and desire for recognition come between him and his fellow disciples. He realized now how wrong he had been, how much he had allowed his own ego to cloud his judgment. Without a word, Peter turned to his brother Andrew and embraced him. The other disciples, moved by the power of the story and the wisdom of their master, followed suit. They reached out to one another, apologizing for past wrongs, forgiving each other, and restoring the bonds that had been strained by their pride. Jesus watched them, his heart filled with joy. He knew that this moment was a turning point for his disciples. They had learned a valuable lesson, not just about relationships but about the nature of love, humility, and forgiveness. This lesson would stay with them, guiding them as they continued their journey, both with him and after his time with them had passed. As the disciples began to leave the hillside, their hearts lighter and their spirits renewed, the sun set over the hills, casting a warm glow over the land. The olive trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the peace that had been missing earlier in the day had returned. This is end of the story. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.